We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It's Tuesday. It's early on in the week, but already a lot of stuff going on. Some of it disappointing to some, and some of it exciting to some. Um, but wait before we talk about all of this stuff before you get too concerned or even too excited. We know that Donald Trump posted his $175 million bond in the Letitia James lawsuit. A lot of people are surprised by that. A lot of people are dismayed by that, like that's bad news. And it's not really bad news necessarily. It is surprising. I'm not sure who he got to put up this bond, but I'd be interested to find out what he had to do to collateralize it, because that's going to have to take a lot of fucking something. And we don't know what that is as yet. Now, we've been listening to Donald Trump railing on Judge Juan Marchand's daughter, of all people. She has no ties to the Manhattan District Court case, but this was the one angle, the one workaround that Donald Trump could get past the a gag order that was installed into his situation. Thought it was a workaround for him. Well, this pissed off District Attorney Alvin Bragg. He asked the judge for a wider ranging gag order, and that's exactly what Juan Marchand did yesterday. So we can talk about that. That's kind of interesting. And one of the other things I wanted to talk about was this whole thing with Donald Trump's True Social merger and turning it into an IPO, and everybody's so certain that Donald Trump was going to make $4 billion in short order. Well, none of that was true. It wasn't going to happen quickly. And as it turns out, one of the things they didn't tell people is that True Social has yet to make any money. In fact, since its inception 2 years ago, it's lost $58 million. The only revenue it's created is $4 million. The financial condition of that company is atrocious. And there are auditors saying, we don't even know if we can keep this thing open. So, as much as Donald Trump wants to believe that he's going to make a ton of money off of it, it's unlikely. This is just a meme stock. This is a joke. This is a hoax. And the interesting thing is that Donald Trump and True Social were kind of Wall Street darlings this past week, seeing the stocks go up and up to ridiculous levels. But after this recent news came out, guess what? The value of those stocks dropped by 30% in one day. This is a pretty volatile stock. It's based on nothing, and it's not going to go well in the end. So, anyway, those are some things we'll talk about. But first, we want to get into the emails that we had come in. By the way, I do still have this cold. I'm trying to get over it. Generally, it's pretty good, but when I start talking, sometimes it catches up with me. So you'll have to bear with me a little bit, but I'll do the best I can. First email. Hi, Mike. Do you know if Biden is looking to place another justice or two into the Supreme Court? I feel like the Supreme Court justices delays and then seek far-reaching loopholes to allow him to slide through his cases, meaning Donald Trump, or push them out. If somehow that pricktator makes his way back into a presidency, he will ultimately sell us to Russia. Putin's salivating as we speak, and for whatever reason, that bloated tick's supporters are more than happy with that. I never realized how many traitors and Putin puppets actually lived among us. It's interesting, they all like to hang the "Don't Tread on Me" flag and our symbol of freedom, our American flag, yet kneel and lick the boots of kleptocracy, plutocracy, and authoritarianism. Baffling and interesting. Thanks for your insightful content and input. Kind regards, Lisa from New Hampshire. And I will say, my wife and I went to New Hampshire a couple of years ago. Absolutely beautiful state. We were in Burlington in the fall. No better place to be in the fall. Do I think Joe Biden's going to put more Supreme Court justices in? Well, it's not like he can just pick up and say, yeah, let's put a couple in more right now. they'll have to try to expand the court. And they're only going to be able to do that if the Democrats get control of the House and the Senate, which they will likely do. Joe Biden has said he wouldn't expand the court, but I have a feeling once he wins this next election, he may see it differently. Certainly, the progressives and the Democrats in the House and the Senate will see it differently. It's the only way to ensure fair and decent Supreme Courts and a legitimate Supreme Court. We've got to balance things out. I mean, we could go the route of trying to impeach these fucked up loser Republicans that are so bad, but that may be a long process and maybe a harder process. I'm not really sure, but as I've said before, three of the first things that Joe Biden and Democrats have to do once they take office in November: codify Roe v. Wade, straighten the fuck out of our Supreme Court, and ultimately the judicial system in general. And then get rid of Citizens United. That's where, politicians can bring in as much money as they want from anywhere and get away with anything. There's a lot to make up and a lot to fix once this election is over. And I do see them trying to do something with the Supreme Court. I'm not uber knowledgeable about all the options with the Supreme Court, but as far as I'm concerned, the best option is to stack the court by putting four more uh, Supreme Court justices in there. And the reason I say four is because there's currently nine justices, and they reached the level of nine justices when there were nine circuit courts. Well, there are now 13 circuit courts. So that would mean adding four more to justify the circuit courts and justice ratio. So it can be explained away. It can be justified. I do think something like that will happen. It almost has to. Otherwise, we're in trouble. As I've said before, if we don't have a legitimate Supreme Court, we're going to have trouble maintaining democracy. And once Donald Trump and the Republicans are out of the way, we got to do something and do something quickly. All right, the next email says, "Hello, Boomer. This is in response to Garage Door Jeff's email about now being the voice of reason for other people. I'm in that same boat. I thank you so much for giving me the power of having knowledge. I know I have some people who text me and literally ask me to talk them off the ledge, and then proceed to tell me what they heard or read. This includes my parents. I'm able to give them the facts without emotion, and it is truly helpful to them. You are curing anxiety one microphone at a time. Thanks again. Dave, your favorite less than cooler than his daughter dad." Dave is one of the first people I met since doing the podcast. He lives here locally. Now, I mean, not real close to me, but close enough. And I had an opportunity to meet him for breakfast one time. Great guy, knowledgeable guy. I think he's a teacher. But he brought his daughter along, his younger daughter. And Dave, I have to give it to you. She is way cooler than you. Frankly, she's way cooler than me. So I will give you that. I'm in agreement. All right. The next email says, "Hello, Boomer. Good podcast this morning, as usual. An interesting question was raised by Tanya, I think, in her email. She asked you if you thought we would ever see a bipartisan cooperation between parties again. You said yes. Great answer, but can we consider this? Biden's administration is getting things done by a coalition of very competent people who have vision, critical thinking, and have the ability to execute their plans. True. I didn't say when we'd see bipartisanism, and the people that are going to have to give a little aren't the Democrats. It's the Republicans. My point is depending on how things go in November, there may not be a need for bipartisanism. There'll be enough of a majority in the House and the Senate and with the president that the Democrats can just get things done on their own. If the Republicans want to get back into the game, they're going to have to start to compromise. They're going to have to look at bipartisanism. So I think ultimately we'll get there as things settle down a little bit more. But I don't know that it's going to be necessary as of this November. I think the Democrats are going to take control because of how badly the Republicans have done, and they may be able to do this all themselves. The email continues. Personally, I think with all the confusion and incompetence we have been seeing in the present form of government, we are seeing the beginning of the end of this archaic relic from the 18th century. It's obvious the demands and the astonishing changes happening in the 21st century are relegating this clown show to the circular file of history. I think we're beginning to evolve to a learner, more pragmatic and productive form of government that eliminates, hopefully, this ridiculous system of provincial jackass congressmen and senators and corrupt judiciary who have made a mockery of democracy and a profession out of corruption. We need a system picked up by the people that can deliver. We should have high-speed trains by now. We should have an infrastructure that is the envy of the world. We should have affordable housing and healthcare, etc. Instead, we have these endless, ridiculous debates and votes about special interests deliberately holding up the progress. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe Ed's too. You two guys would have a field day. And yeah, I agree. Something to think about, Z Man. Well, thank you very much, Z Man. You know, I don't disagree with you. You know, this democracy and the way our system of government currently is, it was created in the 18th century. And when you look at the Constitution or look at some of the things people were thinking about, it really bears no resemblance to what we're dealing with now. With the Constitution, you have the opportunity to add amendments, which means by nature, you change it, adjust it, update it. That's why I always find it weird that we have people who want to be originalists. If the Constitution was intended to be interpreted in its original form and not be changed, then why do we have amendments? Makes no sense. People want to be originalists because they make it sound like, well, we're special. We believe in what the forefathers said. I think the forefathers would agree that with time and changes in society, we needed to make some changes in the Constitution. The whole concept of what we have in our democracy clearly isn't working today. It's not working today. I'm not saying democracy doesn't work, but I'm saying today isn't working. And it's because of the quality of the people we have in politics. So we have to make allowances for that. We have to figure something out because we can't continue to be stagnant as a government, costing people their lives and their freedoms just because two fucks want to play political games. I don't think you're far off, Mike. I think that there does have to be some changes, subtle changes. And I'm not saying we go to socialism or communism, but we do have to alter what we've been doing for 250, 300 years. These are different times. We are different people, and we should adjust accordingly. All right, next email. Mike, LMFAO. I turned into Newsmax to see what kind of bullshit they're feeding the idiot dullards and the sheep in the word, and I was not disappointed. Damn. They openly admit that the former Democratic presidents gathered for a record breaking $26 million fundraiser, but added a caveat. They claim that this weekend Trump is having a fundraiser that's going to shatter the new record. Apparently, this massive gathering is going to generate at least $33 million for the Orange Lord and Savior. I literally choked on my coffee. Where have all these rich benefactors been? Were they all specifically waiting for this moment? They somehow knew that the Democrats would pull in and when they would do it, man, they're either a lot smarter than I thought they were or they're lying through their teeth. I would suggest the latter because he's still struggling for money. He says, I'll give you 10 to 1 odds. It's the latter. Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I'll be paying close attention this weekend. Can't wait to see Dirty Diaper Dottie up on stage begging a crowd of about 100 people to help him come up with 33 million. One thing though, shouldn't he have done it this past weekend? The 175 mil is going to be due before the groundbreaking fundraiser. These MAGAs are so full of shit. They don't even try to deny it anymore. They used to be a scary situation. Now just makes me laugh uncontrollably. Keep up the good work. That expected blue wave is going to be a tsunami. Paul. Well, of course, this was written before we found that Donald Trump posted the $175 million in the bond for the Letitia James lawsuit. I find it interesting that they're talking about they're going to beat the record with 33 million. How are they going to do that? Donald Trump doesn't have any rallies scheduled, and the reason Donald Trump doesn't have any rallies scheduled because he ain't got no money. If you're going to get $33 million in a rally, you better figure out how to get the money to have the fucking rally. What Fox was saying was absolute bullshit. Not only will Donald Trump not fundraise $33 million, he hasn't fundraised $26 million in the entire quarter. Donald Trump has money problems. People aren't sending him money. He doesn't have the support he claims he has. You can lie all about it you want, but if you ain't got the money, you ain't got the money. All right. Thank you, Paul, for the email. All right. Next one says, greetings. Just wanted to say I appreciate your input 100%. This will be a little long, but not too bad. My uncle was a Marine in Vietnam. He saw horrible shit, but he was never stopped talking about any of it until just recently. He grew up on a farm with a complete waste of humanity named Joe. Joe thought he was John Wayne. As far as I know, he was a dry drunk. Joe was his stepfather. His real father was a Seabee in World War II, and that's how Joe knew him. They were Seabees together. His name was Frank Rooney. Yes, I'm terminally Irish. Rooney drank himself to death. Go figure. When Joe married his mother, he said flat out, I hate you, you little crumb snatcher. But I got to put up with you to be married. So you're going to work like slaves, and that's that. Joe was once caught with an axe about to chop my uncle's head off when he got older. My uncle joined the Marines because he hated Joe and felt like he had something to prove, and the Marines were just the ticket. Classic full metal jacket scenario. He wanted to be a photographer. So, of course, the recruiter would say, sure, have you're taking snappies in 6 months after basic. Bad chance. He wound up calling in fire missions with Wooly Pete. Really saw humanity at its worst. He came back a diehard liberal for obvious reasons. The crux of this email is that I grew up with two bug shit insane parents. My mother was the product of the same stepfather, crazy as a sprayed roach, and my father had a famous mother who was one of but a handful of female pilots in the world at the time. He had a stepfather who also flew, and when his hangar and pilot shop burned down without insurance, he developed around 23 different distinct personalities. Don't know why I'm coughing. I don't know why I'm coughing so much. I wasn't 20 minutes ago. Anyway, he says, point being, he was kind of insane. You can't even comprehend. I have a very tiny family, no cousins, none of that. My uncle was the only one who looked out for me. I have autism, and back in the day, there was no autism, just bad kids and kids who were a little, shall we say, slow. Anyway, my uncle took me out to do things and such when I was young. And when I got older, he let me live with him in Seattle until I got on my feet. My family has always been big on political conversation. As a result of my father's childhood, he had the enlarged amygdala conservative thing going on, and my uncle was totally opposite. So political discourse was literally a family tradition. Good word. I really don't know how to pronounce the word. I've heard it, but I don't know anything about it. I got to be honest. Anyway, you get the point. To wrap this up, you very much have my uncle's voice verbatim. Listening to your podcast really helps me get through. I recently had a catastrophic financial meltdown, and I'm 1/4 away from earning my diesel technology associate degree. Not as bad as Dump, apparently. I'll never say that name, but bad enough. To conclude, I really appreciate your intelligent, mocking derisiveness tone as concerns all things maggot. It really helps me feel at home during these tough times. Thanks again, Trevor. Well, thank you, Trevor. I appreciate it immensely. It's an interesting story. I mean, I think that's the thing about all of us. I think we all have interesting stories, experiences in our life. It's just a matter of us recognizing those stories and figuring out a way to tell them. Because I think stories like that are important. We have to understand that people go through all kinds of different things and they have different things to offer based on their experiences. I think a lot of people my age and maybe older went through some very dysfunctional lives. Parenting was a much different thing in the 60s and the 50s and the 40s. Kids were treated much differently than they're treated today. And it's almost amazing that these kids survived some of the shit they went through. I hear stories when my grandfather was young, and it's amazing. It would be terrifying for anybody who's a child now to go through those things. Then you throw in a world war and some other dysfunction, some mental infirmity, and life can get very tough, very tough. And it should be um, a credit to anybody who can get through their life after going through those things and coming out with a relatively normal mindset and a normal life. Trevor, thank you very much for that email. All right. I don't know. I wasn't coughing that much earlier today, and now all of a sudden I'm doing this and it's hitting me. I apologize. Now, as I mentioned before, Donald Trump posted a $175 million bond on Monday in his New York civil fraud case. That's halts the collection of the more than 454 million he owes and preventing the state from seizing his assets to satisfy the debt while he appeals. I think that's one thing that people have to understand, and I think it's confusing to folks. He was going to have to put up the entire bond of $454 million. He couldn't do it. And for whatever reason, the appellate court said, okay, how about 175? So he put up the 175, but that doesn't excuse him from the rest of the money. When the appeal runs out and he isn't a winner of that appeal, he will have to pay the entire $454 million plus interest. It's going to go up well past five, if not $600 million by that time. But go ahead, Donnie, dick around. Cost yourself some more money. Now, a New York appellate court had given the former president 10 days to put up the money after a panel of judges agreed last month to slash that amount. He had actually till Wednesday, till tomorrow, to do that. But for whatever reason, he did it Monday evening. Now, if Trump wins, they're hoping that he can cancel all this shit and then he'll get all his money back. But of course, that isn't going to work. What you have to understand is, in spite of the fact that he came up with a way to post this bond, it's not a win for Donald Trump. Because you see, he had to post the $91 million bond. And now the $175 million bond. And that means there's more than $250 million in a bank someplace that he can't touch, that he can't use, and that he will never get back. And the reason I say he won't get it back is because he's not going to win the appeal. So that money is out of Donald Trump's pocket or out of the pocket of the people who provided the bond. But in order for these guys to offer the bond, he has to put something up, whether it be property or stock or cash or whatever the fuck he did. And I'm trying to think to myself, how did he do that? How did he come up the money? Now, some people were worried about the idea of him getting money from a foreign country, Saudi Arabia, Russia, something like that. And that is a concern. And presumably, if they would have given money, we would have found that out, and there wouldn't have been a bond company. There would have just been cash out of Donald Trump's pocket. But it did come through the bond. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't some nefarious benefactor like Russia, Saudi Arabia, or some oligarch here in the country. Because you see, in order to get a bond like this, you have to have some collateral. They don't really want property, they prefer cash. Now, Donald Trump doesn't have the cash, but who's to say somebody, some other country, or some other oligarch doesn't say, you give them the bond, I'll put up the 175 million in escrow. So that money is really backing whatever this bond company put up, but we aren't seeing that it's coming from a foreign country, an oligarch. They're just putting up the collateral for the bond company to put up the money. That sounds a little cynical, and it's certainly possible that that's how this all worked out, but we'll see. But as I've said, what this does basically is it puts everything on hold in terms of collecting on this lawsuit up until the time the appeal is done. Now, they are going to hear arguments for this appeal in September. And then after that, presumably they'll come up with a decision. It may or may not be before or after the election, but it really doesn't matter at this point. And the reason it doesn't matter isn't about the loss, because the money is already out of his hands. Not all the money, because he's going to have to come up with the remainder of the 464 after deducting the 175 when he loses, or the bonds companies are. And they may be surprised that Don's not really good for it. But again, people think he won because he got the bond lowered and then he was able to put it up. But the fact of the matter is the money is still out of his control. It's in a bank. Granted, the state of New York and E. Jean Carroll hasn't received it yet, but that's okay. It's already impacted Donald Trump because he no longer has it. He had to scramble around and get this shit done. So he's sitting there, and if he's appealing it and taking year after year, that money stays out of his control. If he has any belief at all that he'll win an appeal, you'd think he'd want to do it quickly. I think he's smarter than that and knows better. So all he's going to do is try to ride this out as long as he can with hopes of winning the presidency. And as I've told you, that's not going to happen. He doesn't have a prayer at winning the presidency. So come November 5th, after the election, this is going to be one disappointed motherfucker. He's going to have criminal cases climbing up his ass. He's going to have money flying out of his pocket like nobody's business. Donald Trump's just delaying the inevitable. And when it's all delayed down to one point, this is going to be devastating to Donald Trump. He's going to be in some serious trouble. He may already be out of the race by that point, by virtue of felony convictions coming up in the Manhattan district or any number of things. You have to understand there's other people suing Donald Trump too. There's police officers from the Capitol, sitting members of Congress like Eric Swalwell, any number of other people that are suing him. So people are hitting him from all sides. He is going to continue to bleed money. And frankly, he's in trouble. He doesn't have a lot of money. He doesn't have plans for rallies, and that is his only political strategy. So what's going to happen? Any money he does get has to go to legal fees. But he's not even getting enough for that. So this is a moment in time where Donald Trump is in some serious trouble. He's got some serious problems. And whether they're nickeling and diming him or they're taking it away in millions, it's it's hemorrhaging from Donald Trump at this point, and he doesn't really know what to do. I mean, he likes to act tough, or that he's smart, or that he's rich, but that is just not the case. Just watch him when he's talking, if you can find him talking, because there are no um, rallies set up at this point. He doesn't have the money. He's going to be limited to his campaigning in Truth Social, which sounds like that might crash, or on the steps of a courthouse in between trial sessions. How in the world is he going to campaign for the presidency when he has no fucking money? And once he's in court, he'll have no time. See what I'm saying? I can't see how he has any opportunity to win the presidency. All right, we will take a quick break and we will be right back. We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, my throat settled down and I'm not going to be as coughing as much, but I'm not guaranteeing anything. All day, I didn't really cough much, and now I sit down and do this and I'm coughing again. I apologize for that, but I do this every day. And if I take a day off, I'm probably going to get more shit than if I do it while I'm coughing. So, six of one, half a dozen of the other. You just have to bear with me. All right. We were talking about Donald Trump's gag order and how he was trying to get around it. And he has been doing that. Donald Trump's gag order, put on by Judge Juan Marchand in the Manhattan District Court. Um, it was a pretty stringent gag order, but there were some loopholes. And Donald Trump exploited those loopholes by going after Judge Juan Marchand's daughter, which is weird because she works with Democrats, but she has no bearing on this case at all. But apparently, that's enough for Donald Trump to try to create some chaos or uncertainty. And then Alvin Bragg was getting a little frustrated by it. And he asked the judge to expand the gag order, which the judge did. He expanded it to the judge's family and Alvin Bragg's family, the DA. Now, that said, Donald Trump can still go after the judge and the DA, but that's pretty much it. Anything further than that, he might be found in contempt of court and in violation of the gag order. And then we'll see what the judge is willing to do to hold him accountable. So the Manhattan judge expanded the limited gag order imposed on Donald Trump. That's regarding the hush money trial coming up. A series of attacks on the judge and his family started to piss a few people off. Judge Juan Marchand barred the former president from going after his family members or those of Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, saying Trump's efforts served no legitimate purpose. He said it merely injects fear in those assigned or called to participate in the proceedings, that not only they, but their family members as well, are fair game for defendants' vitriol. It is no longer just a mere possibility or a reasonable likelihood that there exists a threat to the integrity of the judicial proceedings. The threat is very real. His previous order blocked Trump from disparaging or making public comments about witnesses, prosecutors, court staff, or jurors. But the judge pointed to Trump's comments in recent days and said the court could not rely on the former president to modulate his behavior during the proceedings without explicit instructions. Admonitions are not enough, nor is the reliance on self restraint, Merchan added. The average observer must now, after hearing the defendant's recent attacks, draw the conclusion that if they become involved in these proceedings, even tangentially, They should worry not only about themselves, but for their loved ones as well. The judge declared that those concerns would undoubtedly interfere with the fair administration of justice in the Manhattan criminal case. Bragg's office on Monday asked Marchand to expand the order offer. Trump took aim at the judge's daughter, spreading false claims about her on social media. See, that's the thing. He was talking shit about the daughter, but he was also lying about it, as Donald Trump does. Judge Marchand went on to say defendants' dangerous, violent, and reprehensible rhetoric fundamentally threatens the integrity of these proceedings, and it is intended to intimidate witnesses and trial participants alike, including this court. Trump knows what he's doing, and everyone else does too. That came from Alvin Bragg. Former president assailed Marchand after the judge imposed the order last week, claiming Marchand was attempting to deny the former president his First Amendment right to speak out against the weaponization of law enforcement. Oh, he's more than welcome to speak, but you have to understand, in spite of the First Amendment, there is some accountability for those things you say, especially if they happen to be lies or they're trying to incite people to violence. Trump claimed that Marchand's daughter Lauren had used an image of him behind bars as her profile picture on the social media platform X, which was not true. The account once belonged to the judge's daughter, but she deleted the handle about a year ago. It has since been taken over by someone else. A spokesperson for New York State's court was forced to clarify that she was not linked to the account in any way. So let me get this straight. The judge's daughter is allowed to post pictures of her dream of putting me in jail. The Manhattan DA is able to say whatever lies about me he wants. The judge can violate our laws and Constitution at every turn, but I'm not allowed to talk about the attacks against me, Trump wrote on Truth Social. Well, it's funny you should mention lies, Donald, because that's all you put out there are lies, and you incite people to violence. You incited them to attack the Capitol on January 6th. You've incited them to go after uh, Georgia election officials. Um, that's the interesting thing. You want to complain that they get to do something that is in fact true, and you don't get to do what you want. Yeah, that's exactly it, motherfucker. You don't get to lie, and you don't get to attempt to hurt other people. Now, Trump had been subject to a gag order during his civil fraud trial in New York. He was fined twice for violating the restrictions, and the judge overseeing the case warned the former president to refrain from doing so again or face even worse penalties. But we never saw those worse penalties. Now, the trial with Marchand is set to start on April 15th. It's coming close. And it's all about the payments he made before the 2016 presidential election to quash accusations of extramarital affairs. The payment includes a reported $130,000 to adult film star Stormy Daniels less than a month before the election. A lot of people think that this is about hush money, and it's really not about hush money. I mean, that's part of the story, but it has to do with election interference and fraud, making payments and calling them something different or trying to cover them up. Those were the problems. That's where the laws were broken. And that's why Donald Trump's looking at felonies as opposed to misdemeanors. Now, some people have said even if he's convicted in these cases, he won't go to jail. I don't know that's true, especially if he gets convicted of multiple felony charges. He could very well go to jail. He could also get parole, and that will just be the first trial where he's found to be guilty. And as I've said before, it's more important that he's found guilty than he is spending time in jail. I mean, frankly, he can appeal it and stay out of jail for a while. I'm not worried about him going to jail. I'm worried about him getting felony convictions, and as many as possible. In the Manhattan district, he has 34 charges. Alvin Bragg has a conviction rate of 98%. Even if Alvin Bragg has a bad day and only gets half of them, We're still talking about 17 felonies. That's pretty egregious. The idea that he wouldn't spend some time in jail seems a little bit odd. I would think he would spend some time there. But more importantly than that, having those 17 felony charges as convictions, that's going to impact him a lot with regards to any kind of election that he might be involved in. We had another interesting legal decision today that we should talk about. Florida State Supreme Court ruled on Monday that the state constitution does not protect abortion care, declaring the state's current 15-week ban constitutional and giving the go ahead for a 6-week ban to take effect in 30 days. Now, that all sounds like bad news. The High Court ruled that a privacy clause in the state constitution does not protect abortion care. They don't give a fuck about privacy if it has to do with abortions. Now, the parties have presented thoughtful arguments as to the scope of this provision, which has traditionally been referred to as a privacy clause. That's the basis for Roe v. Wade. Those legal arguments on the privacy clause's meaning are, in our view, distinct from the serious moral, ethical, and policy issues that are implicated in the subject matters. Our analysis focuses on the privacy clause text, its context, and the historical evidence surrounding its adoption. The ruling continues after considering each of these sources and consistent with long-standing principles of judicial deference to legislative enactments, we conclude there is no basis under the privacy clause to invalidate the statute. Now, pro-choice groups and abortion providers filed suit against the state in 2022 after Ron DeSantis signed the 15-week ban. The Supreme Court, which DeSantis has stacked with conservative judges, has agreed to hear arguments in the case last year, but allowed the 15-week ban to stay in effect. Now, Dr. Cecilia Grande, a Florida OBGYN, told reporters on Monday afternoon that a 6-week abortion ban will be very detrimental for birthing people in Florida. This represents pretty much a total ban, Grande said. We anticipate that patients are going to have a delay in care that's not good for the doctors, and that's not good for patients. It's a very bad deal for the women of Florida to have a 6-week abortion ban. Also, though, on Monday, the Florida Supreme Court did approve a pro-choice amendment to appear on the state's ballot in November. See, there's the catch. The amendment seeks to protect abortion up until fetal viability, usually at around 24 weeks. Oral arguments in the lawsuit brought by Planned Parenthood, the American Civil Liberties Union, and other parties were heard in September. Now, abortion has been recognized as a right in Florida for decades. Whitney White, an ACLU staff attorney, said during oral arguments, there's no basis in the text to exclude a decision so personal and so private as to whether to continue a pregnancy. Last year, the state legislature passed a 6-week abortion ban that includes exceptions for rape, incest, or human trafficking, but only through the first 15 weeks of pregnancy. In order to get an abortion, the survivor must provide a copy of a restraining order, a police report, a medical record, or other court order documentations to prove she was a victim of rape or incest. And see, that's where they get you. If you don't have a police report, and I think we were talking to Old Soul, you also have to have a conviction because he's innocent until proven guilty. And by the time you get through that, it's well into the pregnancy and the abortion doesn't occur. So it's all a bunch of games and all a bunch of delay tactics to completely ban abortion. Now, the interesting thing is that because the Supreme Court is going to allow a ballot or the abortion issue on the ballot, this poses a lot of problems for Florida, the Republicans in Florida, and Ron DeSantis. We know how these elections have gone and how when the pro-choice option is on the ballot, even the reddest states, they seem to fail. They almost always fail. And the reason they fail is because 75% of this country believe and support Roe v. Wade. By taking abortion rights away, you take away constitutional rights away from all women, which amounts to 50% of this country. It's not a popular decision. And the legislatures and the governors can say, yeah, we don't want that, and that's the way it's going to go, in spite of the fact the majority of people in their state disagree with them. So by putting it on the ballot, we get the people to have their voice. And in Arkansas and in Ohio and other states around the country that are solid red and want to outlaw abortion, when the people of those states got an opportunity to vote, they voted in favor of pro choice. So I'm sure that the legislator, the Republicans in Florida, are going to be trying to find ways to stop this or make it confusing. You know, that's what they always do. They create the amendment in the ballot to be confusing. Do I vote yes or do I vote no? And they make it confusing. So you think you're voting the right way, and then you end up voting the wrong way. They hoodwinked you, they gaslit you. So there's going to have to be a lot of people paying attention and people identifying what this question is, what it means, and how you should answer. Again, it's worked in Ohio and Arkansas and some other red states throughout the country, and I have no doubt that it will work in Florida. They want to ban abortion, but the people of Florida are not likely to agree with them. So if they get a chance to vote on this, I suspect that it's going to go pretty well for abortion rights. Now, Chief Justice Carlos Munez said, this is a 50-year reflection of by our society, by our state, that people's elected representatives believe that there is a compelling interest in protecting human life. Why should we as a court not defer to that? The 15-week abortion ban, which has stayed in effect during legal battles, includes no exceptions for rape or incest and only allows exceptions if the pregnant person is at risk of serious injury or death when the fetus has a fatal abnormality. But as Huffington Post reported, life saving exceptions in abortion bans often don't work in practice, and there have been multiple instances where Floridian women's lives were put at risk because they were denied care. A 6-week abortion ban will likely devastate access not only to the Floridians, but for people seeking care across the Southeast. Florida became a safe haven for abortion care after the U.S. Supreme Court repealed federal abortion protections in 2022, leading nearly a dozen states, mostly in the Southeast, to enact near total abortion bans. People in that part of the country who have the resources to travel to largely gone to Florida or North Carolina to get abortion care. Now, North Carolina enacted a 12-week abortion ban last year, and South Carolina a 6-week ban. The last abortion safe haven in the region now is Virginia. Abortion bans like the ones in the Southeast disproportionately affect low income people, women of color, people who live in rural areas, women with disabilities, and trans and gender nonconforming people. So, this is a tough situation in Florida, but since it's going to be on the ballot, I think we're going to have a lot of disappointed Republicans and Trumplafucks. The people of the state of Florida are going to vote for abortion rights. We don't need a bunch of old white people telling young people what their destinies should be. They should have the opportunity to make those decisions for themselves. figure out their own destiny, because long after these old white people are dead, these people are going to have to live with the aftermath. This is why I've said all along, it's about time we get rid of all the old white people, let the Gen X, Millennial, and Gen Z into the seats in Congress so they can determine what's going to happen with their lives going forward. But as long as we have these Republican fucks trying to control everything and trying to ban abortion, we're going to have people angry, and we're going to have women's lives at risk. And they don't care. All they care about is getting what they want, when they want it, how they want it. But I think once it goes to the ballot and once people start voting, then there are going to be people that are gravely disappointed. And I think they know that's already coming. They're smart enough to know the vast majority of the public agrees with Roe v. Wade. They do everything they can to try to keep it off the ballot. Even when it's decided to put it on the ballot, they will try ways to, as I say, dick around with it to make it more difficult for people to vote. But the bottom line is, if we have a government and we have representatives in government, their first job is to represent us as a people. And given that this is a democracy, when you have 75% of the people that disagree with the legislatures, they should bend and do exactly what the people who elected them tell them to do. But they refuse to do that. They think they know better. Well, they don't. And with regards to this abortion situation being put on the ballot in Florida, these old white Republicans are going to fuck around and find out. Much like Ohio and Arkansas and other places, Florida Republicans will lose this one, inevitably. All right. We're getting down to the late stages of the show, and I wanted to talk about something that people have really been ranting and raving about excitedly. Some people dealing with it and being very nervous about it. It's about Donald Trump's social media platform, Truth Social. There had been talk about a merger and then ultimately turning it into an IPO, which they did do. Now, as soon as that happened, you kept hearing Republicans say, oh, it's going to make Donald Trump $4 billion. He wins again, which is weird because he never wins. But they talked a good game about this stock. And in the beginning, it took off pretty well. It was actually gaining some ground. Now, of course, Donald Trump can't cash anything out or use it for collateral for at least 6 months. And frankly, 6 months is a long time for a stock like this because it's not really a stock. Take, for example, Reddit. It's not a huge app, but it is a sizable app. They have a lot of users on their app. They value Reddit at about $6 billion, but they've got hundreds of millions of people who use the app. Donald Trump and the Republicans are trying to suggest that True Social is worth $5-6 billion, but they have less than 1 million users on the app. How does that make sense? Well, it makes no sense at all. But the hype was there in the beginning, and it looked like it was going to take off and do pretty well. Up until the time a story was put out today, or yesterday actually, and this story exposes what True Social is truly about. You've heard people talk about it. The True Social has yet to make any money. Well, I guess that's not that crazy when you come to businesses not making money the first few years. That may be the explanation. But it turns out that True Social, over the past 2 years since its inception, has lost $58 million. The only revenue it's derived is $4.1 million. Well, if you're running a business, it doesn't take a genius to realize that that is fucking atrocious. It's horrible. And there are some auditors concerned about the viability of True Social, meaning that the money problems are so bad that they may have to shut the company down. and that's distinctly possible. Now, True Social had been kind of a Wall Street darling for some time when it first came out because it was peaking pretty high. But after this story about the steady losses with True Social, the stock market took another look at what Donald Trump's stock is about, and it dropped like 30% in one day. 30% in one day. Now, who's to say what's going to happen henceforth? The news isn't going to get better. They're going to continue to lose money, and they'll be exposed for the bullshit that is True Social, trying to tell us that this is worth billions of dollars and you have less than 1 million users. That's absolutely ridiculous. That makes no fucking sense at all. So, investors on Monday got their first peek at the financials of the Trump Media and Technology Group, the owner of the True Social platform, and they did not like what they saw. Shares in the firm plummeted by more than 30% in the hours after it released its financial statement, thus shaving billions of dollars off the market cap. As of noon on Monday, the shares were trading in the $51 range after having closed at just under 62 the previous day. It lost $11 per share. Now, as Forbes reports, this development has taken an axe to former President Donald Trump's personal stake in the firm, which some observers speculate he would use to help pay off his considerable legal bills. Now, Trump owns 78.5 million shares in Trump Media, about 57% of all outstanding shares, accordingly had his stake in the social media venture slide from its peak of 6.25 billion to Monday's 4.25 billion. He lost $2 billion in just a few days. And if you think the losing has ended, it has not. Given that Trump Media reported a net loss of $58 million last year on revenues of just over $4 million. The firm's current price earnings ratio is in negative territory, which suggests that the stock could fall even further unless dedicated fans of former president rush in and help keep its price high. That's going to have to be a lot of people, and Donald Trump has already drained a lot of motherfucking people. Now, added to this, Forbes writes that Trump Media's 1,470 price to sales ratio, which compares a company's total valuation to its last 12 month sales, is exponentially higher than social media peers Reddit and Snap's respective 9 and 4 price to sales ratios. It's always possible that the firm could generate more revenue, but it is unclear at this point what a strategy to make money from True Social would entail given its low core user base and lack of success in attracting major advertisers to spend money there. Everybody's excited about how much Donald Trump is going to get out of this deal. I'll be surprised if he gets anything out of this deal. It's dropped considerably in a day, and it's going to continue to drop mainly because they aren't making any money, not even close to making money. They're losing money. They are hemorrhaging money. And anybody with a good mind in terms of investment, this is not a good investment. They cannot sustain this high peak that they had when they first started. Eventually, people will understand what's going on and they will be a little more cautious about investing. And when people get more cautious about investing, that doesn't spell a lot of good things for the price ticket on these shares. So you may have been excited about the prospect that Donald Trump was going to get all this money and he was going to save himself. The fact of the matter is that isn't likely to happen. What's likely to happen, it's going to look good for a little bit and then it's going to slowly fade away. They need more users on True Social. When they were valuating True Social at $5 billion, that was based on having 10 million users in 2024. Well, it's 2024 and we're under 1 million users. So you can see how they failed there. The valuation went up based on prediction that there would be 10 million followers on True Social come 2025. And since they're losing ground and not gaining ground, that is likely to be not possible. Now, the only thing that Donald Trump can do, and the Trumplifucks and the company tied to this situation, is try to hype it up again. They got that hype going um, when it first went to the IPO. Everybody was excited. Everybody wanted a piece of Donald Trump. But as this thing fades away, as this thing gets worse and worse, fewer people are going to want to put money into this thing. And when fewer people put money into this thing, the stocks drop. And I think that's ultimately what's going to happen. The stock is going to go through the floor. Donald Trump will have once thought that he was going to make billions of dollars, and the exact opposite is true. He's not going to be able to make his money. Certainly not in short order. As I've said, he can't really take anything until 6 months after the IPO has been issued. So he's got a while to wait. And Donald Trump isn't performing very well for the people, the investors of True Social. I don't know what they told them when they were looking for the investments, but clearly they didn't tell them the truth. If I'd had a chance to talk to these people, I would explain you're betting on something that is nothing. You're betting on something that has no profit, has no vision or strategy to gain profit. This is just a vanity project by Donald Trump, and you're here to support him. Give him money so he can keep his head above water. I have to feel that a lot of people in business are a little tired of that. They're a little tired of handing over money to Donald Trump so he can just fuck up again. And, he's living on a shoestring. That's not going to be able to continue this way. This stock is going to go down the shitter. It's going to be a penny stock before it's all over. And it's going to be fun to watch. Donald Trump will have been looking at this to save his soul. And now what it's probably going to do is bury him. All right, we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I appreciate the time you've spent to listen to the show. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again soon.